This is the story about our American Revolution. British General Lord Cornwallis could not suppress the American rebellion in the South. Frustrated by losses at Kings Mountain, Cowpens, and Guilford Courthouse, Cornwallis moved his army north to Virginia in an effort to turn off the spigot of French aid that was helping fuel the American resistance. By establishing a military base of operations at Yorktown, Cornwallis could be reinforced by British Royal Navy supply ships, vessels that were soon engaged in a fierce naval battle off the Virginia Capes. While French and British ships battled for control of the Chesapeake Bay, Generals George Washington and Rochambeau were marching their troops and wagon trains south through Virginia to lay siege to Yorktown, entrapping Cornwallis and his entire army. This is the story of that march.
Hello, and welcome to the Real American Revolution, where we explore what really happened before, during, and after America's War for Independence. This series, retracing the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route, is sponsored by the National Park Foundation and the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route Association, commonly referred to as W3R US. Now, my name is Randy Flood, and I'll be your host through this journey. Today, we are at Yorktown Battlefield, Redoubt No. 9, and we're very fortunate to have with us Dr. Robert Seelig, America's foremost expert in the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flood, for introducing me here again and for accompanying me as we come to the final acts of the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route as we are talking about the Siege of Yorktown. We know that now that Lord Cornwallis has been confined to the area of Yorktown and his headquarters are over there to my left, and that Allied forces both on water as well as on land have established a siege ring around Lord Cornwallis. How does a siege progress? How does that work? Well, a defending general usually sets up a ring of defenses, a ring of outposts half a mile or more away from where he actually is with his headquarters. That is called the first parallel, and the first parallel is behind me where I'm standing. Once the Siege of Yorktown begins on the 28th of September, when Allied forces, French and American, begin their march onto Yorktown, Lord Cornwallis does something that's very surprising, and that is he completely abandons his outer defenses, his outer outposts, and retreats to the second, what's now the second parallel, that is closer to his headquarters and which is defended by 10 redoubts. Now, what is a redoubt? A redoubt is an earthwork, something that is put up temporarily outside the main defensive line to slow down the advance of the enemy. Lord Cornwallis establishes 10 of these redoubts over from my left to my right, all the way to the York River. 10 redoubts are established, earthworks that are defended by what is called the abattis. Those are tree trunks that are put into the earthworks with sharpened edges sticking out to make it more difficult for the attackers to get in there. Now, in the course of the siege, these redoubts from number 1 to number 10 all need to be captured so that the ring, the noose around Lord Cornwallis, can be tightened more and more in order to bring more artillery to bear on the enemy, etc. By the 13th of October 1781, that's after about a good 2 weeks of the siege, there are only 2 of these redoubts left that are still in British hands. One of them is redoubt number 9, in front of which I'm standing, and the other is redoubt number 10, the last of the redoubts established by Lord Cornwallis, and one that is on the river banks on the edge of the York River. These 2 redoubts need to be taken, they need to be captured so that Washington and Rochambeau can move their troops closer to Lord Cornwallis and, as I said, to tighten the noose around British forces. Washington and Rochambeau know that these redoubts need to be taken, and they decide to attack these redoubts in the evening of the 14th of October 1781. The redoubt number 10, the one closest to the river, is the smaller of the 2 redoubts, and that will be taken, as the decision is, it will be attacked by the light infantry under Colonel Alexander Hamilton, and you may have heard the name Alexander Hamilton before. This redoubt, as I said, is the smaller of the 2 redoubts. There's about 60 or 70 men in there. They will be attacked by the light infantry. What is the light infantry? The light infantry are the elite troops in the Continental Army. Those are young men, agile, who can withstand the rigors of the campaign. They are chosen for that attack. Redoubt number 9, which is the larger of the 2 redoubts, has about 140 or so defenders, will be attacked by the French. That is not because Washington doesn't think his army can take the larger redoubt. It is a matter of honor who attacks which redoubts, and he is granting Rochambeau the honor that his forces will attack redoubt number 9. In both cases, the attackers are about 400 men. In the case of redoubt number 9, we have the grenadiers and the chasseurs of the Royal de Pont regiment, and the grenadiers and the chasseurs of the Gatinois regiment. The Gatinois regiment is chosen because that's one of the units that come with the Marquis de Saint-Simon to help in this siege. So Rochambeau can't just take all the attacking forces from his own. He has to take some from the Marquis de Saint-Simon, because that's again a matter of honor who gets to attack these 2 redoubts. The 2 redoubts, as I said, will be attacked in the evening of October 14, 1781, with the knowledge that this attack must not fail, because without these 2 redoubts taken and in Allied hands, the siege cannot progress. It starts in the evening of October 14th. And what I want to do now is read to you an account of both the attacks on redoubt number 9 and the attacks on redoubt number 10. Redoubt number 10, the American redoubt, as I said, is attacked by the light infantry, and one of the men who is in that attack force is someone we've already heard of, and that's Joseph Plum Martin. And Joseph Plum Martin, his diary and his account of the Yorktown is a wonderful booklet to read if you ever have the time. Just buy this little book, or it's available online too, and just read it to get an insight of the sometimes not so serious side of the American War of Independence. October 14, of course, is a very serious aspect and part of Joseph Plum Martin's life. He writes in his book, in his memoirs that are published in the 1830s, he writes, "At the dark, the detachment was formed and advanced beyond the trenches and lay down on the ground to await the signal for advancing the attack, which was to be 3 shells from a battery near where we were lying. All the batteries in our line were silent, and we lay anxiously awaiting for the signal. The 2 brilliant planets, Jupiter and Venus, were in close contact in the Western Hemisphere, the same direction the signal was to be made. Our watchword was Rochambeau, the commander of the French forces' name, a good watchword for being pronounced Rochambeau. It sounded, when pronounced quick, like rush on, boys. We had not lain there long before the expected signal was given for us and the French, who were to storm the other redoubt by the 3 shells, with the fiery trains mounting the air in quick succession. The word up, up was then reiterated throughout the detachment. We immediately moved silently on toward the redoubt. We were to attack with unloaded muskets. Just as we arrived at the upper T, the enemy discovered us and opened a sharp fire upon us. We were now at a place where many of our large shells had burst in the ground, making holes sufficient enough to bury an ox in. The men, having their eyes fixed upon was what transacting before them, were every now and then falling into these holes. As soon as the firing began, our men began to cry, "The fort's our own," and it was "Rush on, boys, rush on, boys." Our miners were ordered not to enter the fort, but there was no stopping them. "We will go," they said. "Then go to the devil," said the commanding officers of our corps, "if you will." While passing, a man at my side received a ball in his head and fell under my feet, crying out bitterly. While crossing the trench, the enemy threw hand grenades into us. They were so thick that at first I thought them cartridge papers on fire, but was soon undeceived. As I mounted the breastwork, I met an old associate hitching himself down into the trench. I knew him by the light of the enemy's musketry. It was so vivid. The fort was taken and all quiet in a very short time. That's a wonderful account of what's happening on the evening of the 14th of October, just a couple hundred feet from where I'm standing. But it also points out that war is a bloody affair, that people get killed, people get wounded in this process, and Joseph Plum Martin is one of those who survives. At the same time as the Americans are storming Redoubt number 10, the same is going on here at Redoubt number 9 with French forces. In this Redoubt number 9, there are not just English soldiers, but there are also Hessians in there. We haven't talked about Hessians much, but they're part of Lord Cornwallis's army, Hessians that are in there among those 140 or so men that are defending. Let's take a minute and talk about who the Hessians are, because they have kind of a bad reputation as savages, as mercenaries, as cruel people. Well, who are the Hessians? How do they end up here in the United States? When Great Britain decides to put down the American rebellion with force, King George realizes that he does not have enough land troops to put down the American rebellion. Most of Englishmen, most Scots serve on the Royal Navy, because the Royal Navy is the single most important force for Great Britain being a colonial empire, sea-based empire. So King George III does what rulers before him had done, not just in England, but all over Europe. He looks for princes, for rulers in Europe, mostly in what is now Germany, so where he could hire soldiers. He approaches the Landgraf of Hessen as one of 5 different princes, like also the Markgraf of Ansbach-Bayreuth, etc. He approaches them and says, "Do you have regiments? Do you have complete units that I could rent?" The Hessians that are over here are not individual soldiers who offer themselves for service. That's what a mercenary is. The Hessians that are over here are men who had 4, 6, 8 or more years of service already in the regiments with which they come over here. They come here as groups and enter British pay the moment they embark on vessels in Bremerlea in northern Germany to come over here. They are no worse and no better than anybody there's fighting over here. One of the reasons why they have this bad reputation is because Congress propaganda leading up to the Declaration of Independence turns them into evil savages, because they provide another reason why the American colonists have to declare their independence. And if you read the Declaration of Independence, beyond the first paragraph, you will see that the Declaration of Independence is a whole list of grievances, a whole list of complaints of what King George III has done or not done. And one of the lines in there is that King George III has hired foreign mercenaries to come and kill your wives and your children and all kinds of evil things. That has nothing to do with the reality, because King George is hiring complete regiments. They are sent to do the job, but it serves a wonderful political purpose. And the Hessians, these poor guys, have been stuck with the label of being mercenaries, of being evil people who have come over here. And lest we forget, many of them, thousands of them, liked it so well over here that they either deserted or received permission from their rulers to stay over here. And they have tens of thousands of offspring who are living now in the United States, even a country that they had fought against, but which they in the end liked so much that they decided to stay here. In this Redoubt number 9, they're not just English soldiers, but there are also Hessians in there. That causes a problem at some point, because the Hessians speak German, and the Royal Dupont regiment that we talked about also speaks German. So there's some confusion at some point who is on which side, as the attackers and defenders use the same language. That's of course also happening on Redoubt number 10, but it becomes a little more difficult over here. The attack and taking of Redoubt number 9 takes a little longer, because there are more forces in there, more defenders in there, and so the battle takes a little longer. But eventually that fort, that redoubt rather, is also taken. And let me just read to you real quickly what the commanding officer of the attacking party of Redoubt number 9 writes about it. His name is Guillaume de Dupont, William de Dupont, William von Zweibrücken, who is the second in command of the Dupont regiment from Germany. He writes, "Before starting, I had ordered that no one should fire before reaching the crest of the parapet of the redoubt, and when established upon the parapet, that no one should jump into the works before receiving orders to do so. The fire was increasing and making a terrible havoc among the enemy, who had placed themselves behind a kind of entrenchment of barrels where they were well massed and where all our shots told. We succeeded at the moment when I wished to give the order to leap into the redoubt and charge the enemy with the bayonet. Then they laid down their arms, and we leapt in with more tranquillity and less risk, and they shouted immediately the cry of Vive le Roi, long live the King, which was repeated by all the grenadiers and chasseurs who were in good condition, by all the troops in the trenches, to which the enemy replied with a general discharge of artillery and musketry. I never saw a sight more beautiful or more majestic, as the night sky is lit up by fire, by discharge of artillery. If you're a soldier, I guess that's a beautiful sight to see. The important point is that these two redoubts are taken, that the siege line can be completed, and General Washington is very pleased with the results of this attack. Some men get killed on both sides, and we could talk about this when we go over to the French memorial, but the important point had been achieved. If this is the 14th of October, 4 days later on the 18th, Lord Cornwallis asks to open negotiations for surrender. 5 days later, the defeated British army is marching out of Yorktown. Victory is won.
Bob, thanks so much for offering your perspective about Yorktown battlefield and Redoubt No. 9 in particular. To our viewers, thank you for watching. Join us again for our next episode. On behalf of the Real American Revolution, this is Randy Flood. So long for now.